Hi, I'm movie man Eric Houston, and 'tis the season when visions of sugar plums are beginning to dance in all of our heads, and our thoughts turn to that greatest of American traditions, the TV Christmas special. I'm delighted to be joining you today to talk about some of America's favorite TV Christmas specials, and indeed, the TV Christmas special is an almost uniquely American tradition with dozens of new and classic specials airing on television every year. The tradition arguably dates back to 1958, when it was pioneered by a man who pioneered so much of what has become an institution in our pop culture landscape, Walt Disney. It was in that year that Walt featured From All of Us to All of You as an episode of his TV series, Walt Disney Presents.
To all of you, a very Merry Christmas, for on this bright and joyful night, we're glad to have you with us.
This special episode featured new animation of Jiminy Cricket alongside repurposed footage from movies and theatrical shorts, although ironically, most of the footage was not specifically Christmas related. While not especially well remembered here in America, From All of Us to All of You has gone on to become an annual Christmas phenomenon in Sweden, where it is known locally as Kalle Anka, which is Swedish for Donald Duck, and still airs at 3 p.m. every Christmas Eve on Swedish television, just as it did the first time it aired. Each year, entire families of Swedes stop everything to sit down and watch the special as an integral part of their Christmas traditions. The entire country stops, and half of all Swedes tune in to watch the 60-year-old program.
Kanske man måste vara så här liten som Benjamin Syrsa ungefär, eller stark som björnen Baloo, eller lika påhittig som Snövits 7 dvärgar och Piff och Puff och Kalle Anka för att kunna presentera det här programmet.
There is even an exhibit dedicated to the special in Stockholm's Nordic Museum. As Americans, we can relate. While this special has somewhat fallen through the cracks stateside, there are still 2, if not 3, Christmas specials that are practically mandatory viewing in the United States. And perhaps the greatest of them concerns the most famous reindeer of all.
We're a couple of misfits. We're a couple of misfits. What's the matter with misfits? That's where we fit in. We're not Daffy and Gilly. Don't go round willy-nilly. Seems to us kind of silly that we don't fit in.
Rudolph was actually created long before this special, back in 1939, by a man named Robert Louis May. May was a Jewish catalog writer for Montgomery Ward in Chicago. The Montgomery Ward department stores had been in the habit of handing out children's books every Christmas season, and thought it might be cheaper to publish and hand out their own original books rather than first buying someone else's. And they tasked May with the job of writing this new children's book. May, who considered naming the character Rollo or Reginald, took inspiration from his wife's childhood and times when she felt like an outcast. While looking out at the dense Lake Michigan fog, the story suddenly clicked into place for May. This tale of a reindeer with a magical nose whose brightness could cut through the fog or the night and help Santa on his Christmas rounds. Montgomery Ward published the story for the first time that Christmas, distributing some 2.4 million copies. May would return to the character twice, with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Shines Again and Rudolph's Second Christmas. If you're like me, you probably know Rudolph best from the popular song, which followed in 1949 and was actually written by May's brother-in-law, Johnny Marks. Marks is himself sort of a Christmas song legend who would go on to write more than a dozen popular Christmas songs, including Run, Rudolph, Run, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day, and A Holly Jolly Christmas. His song was a massive hit, reaching #1 on the charts the week after Christmas in 1949. That version was sung by Gene Autry, who had initially rejected it, only finally agreeing to make Rudolph a B-side for a different Christmas song after prolonged hectoring from his wife.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer
had a very shiny nose. And if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows.
Rudolph was well on his way to becoming a Christmas icon, and numerous children's authors and songwriters tried to figure out ways to make money off the character both legally and illegally, including an official 1949 animated short from the Fleischer Brothers studio, which is a fair bit different from the Rudolph that we think of today.
I need you tonight to lead all my deer on the rest of our flight.
Still, by 1960, no other piece of Rudolph media had managed to hit as big as the story or the song. Then, in 1964, a strange confluence of events took place. First, 1964 happened to be the 25th anniversary of May's original Rudolph story. At the same time, General Electric was producing a regular television show called the GE Fantasy Hour.
The General Electric Fantasy Hour. An hour-long adventure musical for you and your family.
GE was looking for a story to run at Christmas. Now, the specials were the domain of GE Vice President William Saloff, who just so happened to have been a former marketing executive for Montgomery Ward and Robert May's supervisor. As such, he was very familiar with May, very familiar with Rudolph. And he knew that GE Fantasy Hour and Rudolph's 25th anniversary were a match made in heaven. After all, what better story could there be for GE than a reindeer whose nose is practically a light bulb? To animate the special, he turned to Rankin Bass, then known as Videocraft International, the studio that was already making a Wizard of Oz special for the Fantasy Hour. Rankin & Bass was founded by Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass in 1960 to produce television commercials. The studio quickly moved to the world of television animation and, over the years, produced numerous traditionally animated television shows and movies like Tales from the Wizard of Oz, The Hobbit, and Thundercats. But they are probably best known for their stop-motion animated programs, which were inspired in part by Arthur Rankin Jr.'s love of the special effects in King Kong. They called their animation process Animagic, even though it didn't really differ in any way from traditional stop-motion animation. Most of the model building and animation were outsourced to Japanese studio MOM and Tadahito Machinaga. And, with their help, Rankin Bass released their first Animagic project in 1960, with The New Adventures of Pinocchio.
In my teeth, Mel.
Pull the victim away from the wire with a piece of wood.
A piece of wood? Where can we find a piece of wood?
Wait a sec, Pin. I'll get my glasses and help you look.
For goodness sake, stop all this nonsense and get us off this fence.
You just have to be patient until Pinocchio and I find a suitable piece of wood.
Listen, you gnat-brain nitwit. Pinocchio is made of wood.
I am not a gnat.
After being approached by GE to produce a Rudolph television special, Arthur Rankin Jr. knew just who to turn to for the special's original music. You see, by another amazing coincidence, Rankin just so happened to be neighbors with songwriter Johnny Marks. But Marks was reluctant to see a TV special or any other new Rudolph material. He was making a comfortable living on the rights to the song and didn't want to see its popularity diluted. Rankin persuaded him to change his mind, though, and Marks ended up writing all of the new songs for the special. With Marks in place, Rankin and Bass began working on the special in earnest, always with an eye toward their sponsor in GE, including things like having the elves wrap GE products like hair dryers in the background and producing a series of special GE commercials to run during the special.
Wrapping gifts can be fun, gives a feeling of joy to everyone. Christmas time is almost here, with General Electric gifts to add to the cheer.
Here's the gift for the 25th for every girl who wants a curl.
A General Electric hairdryer in this fashionable new travel case.
There were also General Electric print ads and a special soundtrack album that was given away with the purchase of home appliances. The special was written by Romeo Mueller, who based new characters off ideas from the song and the poem. It was Mueller who created the new characters in the story of Rudolph and his new friends, including Hermie, the elf who wants to be a dentist, and frontiersman Yukon Cornelius, on the run from the menacing Bumble and encountering places like the Island of Misfit Toys and many other wondrous sights. Mueller was a man with an affinity for Christmas and for children. He would read his original Christmas story, Noel, over the radio each Christmas, and would go on to write a number of other Rankin Bass classics, including The Little Drummer Boy and Nestor the Long-Eared Donkey. Mueller's initial drafts were actually pretty close to the finished product, although they included more interaction from the various woodland creatures, a stork character named Gus, who delivers Rudolph at the beginning of the special, and numerous instances of Yukon Cornelius firing his guns. As was typical of the time, the voices for the special were recorded with all of the actors in a room together, like a radio show, unlike today when each actor is typically recorded separately. Rudolph was voiced by Billy May Richards. Like most of the cast, Billy May was a Canadian radio actor, as dramatic radio was still going strong in the Great White North. A woman in her 40s voicing a male character was hardly unusual then or even today, and Billy May has joined a sort of sorority of women voicing male characters that includes June Foray, who voiced Rocky the Flying Squirrel for decades,
and this is Frostbite Falls, Minnesota,
and Nancy Cartwright, who continues to voice Bart Simpson.
Whoa, that's good squishy.
Hermie the Elf was voiced by Paul Soles, who's also a Canadian, and who can also be heard as the voice of Spider-Man in the popular 60s cartoon series.
In case you want more prints, here's my card. Compliments of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
The narrator, Sam the Snowman, was actually added later, and all of Sam's songs were originally performed by Yukon Cornelius and his performer, Larry D. Mann. Popular singer Burl Ives was brought in late in the game by GE to help sell the special to the network and to viewers at home. After all, you can't sell light bulbs if nobody's watching.
Silver and gold decorations on every Christmas tree.
As for Ives himself, his star is somewhat faded in recent years, and he is now arguably best known as Sam the Snowman. In his day, though, he was a popular radio host and country musician whose hits included Funny Way of Laughing and A Little Bitty Tear.
But a little bit of tear let me down, spoil my act as a clown. I had it made up not to make a frown, but a little bit of tear let me down.
He also acted in films like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for The Big Country. Rudolph premiered on NBC on December the 6th, 1964, and has aired every year since, making it the longest continuously running Christmas TV special in American television history. It currently airs on CBS, which has been its home since 1972. Believe it or not, the special has seen a number of changes over the years. For example, the original end credits featured an elf bearing presents marked with the names of the crew. There was also a scene near the end of the special where Yukon Cornelius discovers a peppermint mine. This, as it turns out, was the reason why he kept licking his axe throughout the special. He was never looking for silver and gold at all. This scene had not been seen on television since the initial broadcast, until it was added back into some cable airings of the special in 2019.
Peppermint! What I've been searching for all my life! I've struck it rich! I've got me a peppermint mine! Wahoo!
Those scenes were cut when viewers of the 1964 premiere complained that they never saw Santa fulfill his promise to the Island of Misfit Toys. Consequently, a new ending featuring the Misfit Toys was created for the 1965 broadcast and used ever since. Those other scenes had to be cut to make room. 1965 also saw a new song called Fame and Fortune inserted into the special, where it would remain until a 1998 restoration. The song replaced We're a Couple of Misfits, which had been disliked by William Saloff at GE.
Fame and fortune, fame and fortune. We're off to seek them now.
Rankin Bass's Rudolph proved to be an extremely popular character, and the studio would revisit him twice, in Rudolph's Shiny New Year in 1976, and Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July in 1979.
We're a couple of misfits. We're a couple of misfits.
What's the matter with misfits? That's where we fit in.
There was also a CGI sequel from 2001 called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and the Island of Misfit Toys, which was not produced by Rankin Bass, but did feature many of the characters. The original puppets from the production were long thought lost, that is, until they showed up rather unexpectedly on an episode of Antiques Roadshow. It seems they'd been brought home by a Rankin Bass secretary and used as toys and Christmas decorations for decades. They were eventually stored in a hot attic where most of the puppets melted. Luckily, Rudolph and Santa survived.
It's too bad that Burl Ives melted away, but you know, that's the problem when he's in a hot attic.
Exactly.
They're made out of cloth and wood and I think some plastics and things like that. They're not in perfect condition. Yeah. The nose has been replaced. I guess the bulb broke. Santa's whiskers are missing there, but what an amazing, amazing piece. If I were to estimate it at an auction, I wouldn't estimate it less than $8,000 to $10,000 for the pair. What it would go for at auction, that's anyone's guess.
Okay.
The puppets have since been restored and, as I record this, are about to go up for auction, where they are estimated to make between $150,000 and $250,000. If Rudolph is America's most beloved Christmas special, then number 2 has to be A Charlie Brown Christmas.
I think there must be something wrong with me, Linus. Christmas is coming, but I'm not happy. I don't feel the way I'm supposed to feel.
Peanuts actually started here, well, in St. Paul to be exact, where they appeared in the form of a comic strip called Lil Folks, published in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and written and drawn by hometown boy Charles Schulz. After a few years of success, Schulz submitted his strip to United Features Syndicate, who agreed to syndicate it across the country. They did not like the name Lil Folks, though, and someone suggested the name Peanuts. Schulz hated the title, saying it would only make sense if there was a character called Peanuts, and asked about calling the strip Charlie Brown. The syndicate claimed that title would cause copyright problems, and Peanuts stuck, although Schulz hated the title for the rest of his life. The strip debuted on October 2, 1950 in 7 newspapers, including the Minneapolis Tribune. The strip, which showcased Schulz's acerbic wit and cynical outlook on modern society, was a hit. By the mid-60s, the strip was a genuine international phenomenon, and was even featured on the cover of Time magazine. One of the many people who took note of the strip and Schulz's meteoric rise was television documentary producer Lee Mendelson. Mendelson called Schulz and suggested a half-hour TV documentary about Schulz and Peanuts. Schulz had seen and liked Mendelson's earlier documentary about Willie Mays, and so accepted. Mendelson would later joke that it was a fitting follow-up. After all, Willie Mays was perhaps the greatest ball player of all time, and Charlie Brown perhaps the worst. One feature Mendelson wanted for his documentary was 2 or 3 minutes of animation. Schulz suggested animator Bill Melendez, a former animator on both classic Disney films and Looney Tunes cartoons, who had helped Schulz with the animation on a series of Ford commercials featuring the Peanuts.
He's excited, because he just saw the new Ford Falcon.
Well, everyone who has seen the 1961 Falcon is excited.
But I haven't seen it yet.
Oh.
The trio worked together to make a 30-minute documentary, but were unable to interest the networks.
Love letters to Charlie Brown, threats to Lucy, and a winter outfit for Snoopy from a lady in North Carolina. For Charles Schulz, his characters are practically as real and alive as his own children.
One day, Mendelson received a call from Coca-Cola asking if they happened to have a Peanuts Christmas special in the works. Why they called or how they got the idea isn't exactly clear. All that's clear is that, well, they didn't have a Christmas special in the works, but Mendelsohn didn't want to let the opportunity pass him by, and so he said they did, figuring it would buy them a couple of weeks to get some ideas together. Well, Coke wanted an outline on their desk by Monday. Mendelsohn informed Schultz and Melendez, who were enthusiastic, and the trio quickly got to work on an outline, preparing one just in time. By Monday, Coke gave the special a green light, but now the team had just 6 months to produce it, even though none of them had ever made a TV special before. Still, there were some elements that they were certain they wanted to include. For instance, they knew they wanted a jazz soundtrack, feeling it would appeal to kids and adults, and turned to Vince Guaraldi, who had composed some of the music for the documentary. Vince got to work and soon accidentally composed perhaps the most iconic Peanuts song. Fearing he might forget it if he didn't play it right away, Vince called Mendelsohn and played it over the phone. That main iconic Peanuts song is called Linus and Lucy, and it's just one of the many tracks that Vince wrote for the special, including Christmas Time Is Here, a song which Vince initially wrote to be instrumental. Mendelsohn, though, felt like there should probably be a song for the Christmas special, and he reached out to his songwriter pals to write the lyrics. Unfortunately, none of them were available, and so Mendelsohn ultimately wrote the lyrics himself, writing them in just 15 minutes. The song has gone on to become a classic Christmas staple. Seeking to make the special a bit more true to life, the trio decided to hire actual children to voice the characters. Using real children is unusual even today and was almost unthinkable in 1965. Still, it proved to be a canny decision and is part of what makes the special so unique and charming.
Linus, you've got to get rid of that stupid blanket. And here, memorize these lines. I can't memorize these lines. This is ridiculous.
Only 2 of the children were professional actors. Charlie Brown was voiced by Peter Robbins, a child actor who appeared in small parts in Rawhide, The Donna Reed Show, and The Munsters. Linus was voiced by Christopher Shea, who played Joey in the TV adaptation of Shane. The rest of the cast were mostly culled from the friends, neighbors, and family of the production team, who took home tape recorders to record auditions of their children. Some were as young as 5 or 6 and could not read or remember more than half of their lines at a time. Some even accidentally mimicked Melendez's accent when repeating their lines back to him. The recording session was chaotic, with excited children running through the halls, but was still completed in just a single day. The band Jefferson Airplane happened to be recording next door and thrilled the children by coming over and asking for the kids' autographs. Melendez voiced Snoopy himself.
Can you be a sheep? How about a cow? How about a penguin? Yes, he's even a good penguin.
He originally did it just to fill in, but Schultz and Mendelsohn liked it, and Melendez would remain as the sole voice of Snoopy well into the 2000s. The trio briefly considered giving Snoopy actual spoken dialogue, reasoning that the strip's most popular character should get some of the best jokes. And after all, Snoopy speaks after a fashion in the comic strip, but in the strip, it's always through thought balloons, and ultimately, Schultz couldn't stand the thought of his most famous beagle speaking English aloud. The result was a Harpo Marx-style character who could move and act more freely than the children around him. One other unique element of the special, and one that made Mendelsohn and Melendez nervous, was that Schultz was adamant about including a Bible verse. This sort of thing wasn't being done in cartoons at the time, and there was an attitude that something as sacred as a biblical verse shouldn't be included in something as crass and commercial as a television cartoon. Schultz, though, felt the verses were for everyone and should be shared as freely as possible, and pushed for the inclusion of Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 14, creating one of the most scathing and best remembered moments of the special.
And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them. And the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy.
When the special was complete, Mendelsohn and Melendez were worried about the final cut. They felt that they'd ruined Charlie Brown and were afraid that the special was just too slow and simply didn't work. The network, CBS, didn't like it at all. It was very different from the traditional Christmas television special, and the network specifically objected to the voices, the music, and the lack of a laugh track. Still, they'd spent the money to produce the special and had already begun advertising it. The attitude at the network became, well, we've spent all that money, we're going to air it, maybe we'll do better next year. The special premiered December 9th, 1965, and everyone was shocked by the success. A Charlie Brown Christmas was the second most watched show of that week, behind only Bonanza, earning a 49% share of the audience, which is absolutely unheard of today. It also received an Emmy and a Peabody, and has aired every year since.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown! Hark the herald.
CBS followed the success with two more Peanut specials in 1966, both produced by the trio of Schultz, Mendelsohn, and Melendez. Charlie Brown's All-Stars, the only non-holiday Peanut special, and It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, the only one of the specials to rival A Charlie Brown Christmas in popularity. It too has aired on the network television every year since its premiere.
I got 5 pieces of candy. I got a chocolate bar. I got a quarter. I got a rock.
That special was so popular on its first airing that viewers who felt bad for Charlie Brown receiving so many rocks while trick-or-treating sent in bags and bags of candy from all over the world, just for Charlie Brown. In all, there are more than 40 Charlie Brown TV specials, covering every holiday from Arbor Day to Thanksgiving. There are also 3 more Charlie Brown Christmas specials and a handful of theatrical Peanuts movies, all produced by that same trio of men. Like Rudolph, A Charlie Brown Christmas has changed slightly from year to year. One of the most notable changes comes at the beginning of the show. After Snoopy whips Charlie Brown and Linus around on the ice, we see Charlie Brown crash into a snow-covered tree, but we don't see what happened to Linus. Well, Linus crashed into a Coke sign, a tip of the hat to the sponsor. This moment aired only during the premiere, though, and was dropped thereafter when Coke was no longer the primary sponsor of the special. With Charlie Brown and Rudolph, 2 immensely popular literary characters had made the jump from the page to the screen. It's no surprise, then, that Christmas's next superstar would also come from the pages of a children's book, and that he'd be created by perhaps the greatest children's author of all time.
And the Grinch with his Grinch feet, ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags.
Born Theodore Giesel, he adopted the pen name Dr. Seuss after getting caught drinking in college. This was during Prohibition, and as a punishment, he was forbidden to participate in extracurriculars. And so he adopted the pen name from his mother's maiden name to be able to keep writing in the college magazine. By the 1960s, Dr. Seuss was an insanely popular and respected children's author, with a number of classics already under his belt, like Horton Hears a Who, Green Eggs and Ham, and The Cat in the Hat. He started writing How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 1957, shortly after Cat in the Hat, and he was inspired in part by his own sour feelings toward the Christmas season. and wanted to write a story that might help him rediscover the Christmas spirit. Seuss decided to revive the Grinch, who he'd created 2 years earlier in a story called The Hubbub and the Grinch, which appeared in Redbook magazine. The story proved to be one of the easiest to write of Seuss's career, but he kept getting stuck on the ending, feeling like everything he came up with was either too preachy or too religious, before stumbling upon the simple ending of that famous scene of the Grinch sitting down to a dinner of roast beast. How the Grinch Stole Christmas proved to be a tremendous success and a true part of the popular culture, with recordings of the story being made by the likes of Zero Mostel and Walter Matthau.
The Grinch hated Christmas. The whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right.
But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Who's.
The story has since been adapted into a pair of feature films starring Jim Carrey and Benedict Cumberbatch, and of course, into the classic 1966 television special.
There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here.
That special was directed by Chuck Jones, a legendary animator who, at Warner Brothers, created characters like Marvin the Martian, Pepe Le Pew, and Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, and directed such iconic shorts as Duck Amuck, One Froggy Evening, and What's Opera, Doc?
Won't you return my love, for my love is yours.
Chuck Jones left Warner's in 1962 and founded his own studio, where he'd begun animating a new series of Tom and Jerry cartoons. But that series was winding down, and Jones needed something new for his studio to work on. He thought of his old friend Dr. Seuss, with whom he'd worked closely on Private Snafu, a series of cartoons produced exclusively during the Army during World War II.
When you're digging a slit trench that ought to be deep, and the going's so tough that you go darn near weep, just dig a few inches and crawl in and sleep. And gold brick, just gold brick, just gold brick.
Jones approached Seuss, but Seuss was uninterested in a television special, possibly because of the failure of the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, a surreal live-action movie which featured a screenplay and heavy involvement from Seuss.
Here's to our future, if we have one.
Now, just don't be too heroic, dear August.
Now considered a cult classic, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T nonetheless faced extensive studio edits and became such a commercial failure at the time that Seuss had sworn off Hollywood for good. Jones worked hard to win Seuss over, eventually persuading the beloved children's author with the lyrics to Welcome Christmas. Seuss liked the faux Latin words that Jones incorporated very much in a Dr. Seuss style, and with these lyrics, Seuss began to feel that Jones might be the only person who could capture the spirit of his work on the screen. Jones brought the idea to CBS, who was eager for a new Christmas special after the surprise success of Charlie Brown a year earlier. They offered Jones and Seuss $315,000, the most then paid for a Christmas special. Seuss adapted the book himself, using most of the original text with some additional material, while Jones adapted Seuss's drawings into his own distinct style, in particular designing the Grinch's face after his own, particularly in the eyebrows, and selecting the color green for the Grinch's fur, as the character had only been drawn in black and white in the books. Jones selected Boris Karloff as the narrator and voice of the Grinch. Karloff had been famous in the 1930s and 1940s as the preeminent monster actor, starring as the Mummy and the Frankenstein monster.
And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers, nervously drumming. I must find some way to keep Christmas from coming.
While the special features almost wall-to-wall narration and dialogue from Karloff, there was one small problem. Karloff just couldn't sing, which meant they needed to find somebody else to voice the popular song, "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." They turned to American voiceover artist Thurl Ravenscroft. Ravenscroft had performed a number of Disney voices and was the voice of Tony the Tiger.
You're a vile one, Mr. Grinch. You have termites in your smile. You have all the tender sweetness of a seasick crocodile, Mr. Grinch. Given the choice between the two of you, I'd take the, seasick crocodile.
The lyrics to the song were by Seuss himself, and the music was by Albert Haig, who composed most of the music for the special. You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch reached a high of number 49 on the Billboard charts, and the entire soundtrack won a Grammy for Best Album for Children. How the Grinch Stole Christmas debuted on December the 18th, 1966 on CBS, where it was sponsored by the Foundation for Full Service Banks. It was the 6th most popular program of the week. Meanwhile, the rebroadcast of A Charlie Brown Christmas was number 2. Still, 6 was nothing to sneeze at, and the special received annual airings until 1987. It then bounced from TNT to the Cartoon Network to the WB to ABC, and now is back on NBC. Like the other specials we've talked about tonight, The Grinch would see his share of sequels. The success of The Grinch led Jones and Seuss to collaborate again with Horton Hears a Who. The Grinch himself would return for 2 sequels, The Grinch Grinches the Cat in the Hat, and Halloween is Grinch Night. Of course, neither of these was set at Christmas, and neither featured the involvement of Chuck Jones. Of course, these are only 3 of the most popular Christmas specials of all time, and we all have our own personal can't-miss favorites. Whether you like Frosty or Garfield, or, like me, you can't start the holidays without seeing Bing Crosby and David Bowie.
Peace on earth, can it be? Years from now, perhaps we'll see the day of glory.
These programs are an integral part of our American Christmas traditions. And while some of them are now well over 50 years old, I'm sure they'll continue to be with us for decades to come. I want to thank you for joining me for this look at America's favorite Christmas television specials. If you liked the video, please like or comment, or even send me an email at eric@northmetrotv.com to let me know what you think, or subscribe to the Movie Man Eric YouTube channel. These are the best way that you can make sure that you never miss out on another one of these presentations. Thank you again for joining me. Have a happy holidays, and please stay safe.
I pray my wish will come true. As for my child and your child too, he'll see the day